Welcome to the first module of the Seafood CRC Masterclass in Fisheries Economics. Hello, my name's Sarah Jennings. I'm a natural resource economist in the Tasmanian School of Business and Economics at the University of Tasmania. I've been teaching microeconomics for almost 3 decades and am the Australian author of the text Principles of Economics by Frank, Jennings and Bernanke. I've also taught courses in natural resource economics, benefit cost analysis and international trade. I lead the Fisheries Research Development Corporation's Building Capacity in Fisheries Economics project, which has provided graduate research training for about a dozen students and coordinates the Australian Fisheries Economic Network, FishyCon. I'm also actively involved in a number of marine economics research projects and work with a wide range of national and international collaborators from a diversity of disciplinary backgrounds. By the end of the module, you will be able to use key economic concepts to think as an economist about simple economic issues and decisions, define and interpret economic profit, and explain the characteristics of fish stocks that mean their use cannot be left to market forces. The module covers 4 topic areas through a series of short video presentations. Self-assessment checkpoints help test your understanding throughout the module. Solutions to checkpoint questions are available at the end of the module. When people hear the word economics, they often think of interest rates and taxes, of the cost of their mortgage and the availability of key services. But economics is far broader than suggested by any of these things. In a nutshell, economics is about how people make the most of their lives. It is about how people make economic decisions and the role of incentives in shaping their economic behaviour. It is about the role of policies and institutions, markets, political processes, banks and cooperatives, for example, and how these institutions can be designed to reconcile the potential tension between individuals, usually pursuing their self-interest, and the best outcome for the group or society overall. In examining these questions, economists' contribution to policy making can be both in explaining and predicting how people will behave, and in suggesting what actions should take place. In other words, there's a valid role for economists in both the positive and normative aspects of policy formation. So what is the hallmark of an economic decision? We answer this by asking which of the following are economic decisions. Deciding whether to lease some extra quota units partway through the fishing season. To work through this module of the CRC Masterclass. To make an extra contribution to a superannuation fund. To stop on the way home and enjoy a beer with friends. The answer is that they are all economic decisions. Why? Because they all represent a choice about how to use resources that are scarce relative to the many things you would like to do. When scarcity is involved, there really is no such thing as a free lunch. Rather, there is a trade-off in that choosing one valuable thing means giving up another. This trade-off implies a cost to making a choice, and to distinguish it from the way in which the term cost is generally used, economists refer to it as an opportunity cost. If you're listening to this recording, you've clearly chosen to work through the module. If you would otherwise have used this time to watch old episodes of Friends, for example, the cost of doing so is measured as the benefit you forego by missing out on this. If instead you would have used the time to finish an overdue report, the opportunity cost would be the benefit you expect to gain from this achievement. The trick to understanding opportunity cost is to always be asking what would otherwise have been the case. We all make lots of economic decisions every day in our personal and work lives without giving it a second thought and without performing any formal or explicit calculations. We are already quite adept at doing the cost-benefit calculations that economists believe are at the heart of rational decision-making. People make choices about alternative courses of action by comparing benefits and costs, and will only willingly take an action if they expect the extra benefit they get to be greater than the extra costs. This is not to suggest that people do not make mistakes, and after the event may wish they had chosen differently if costs and benefits don't turn out as they expected. But rather, on the whole, people do not intentionally take actions that will leave them worse off. But even when decisions are seemingly straightforward, people often make mistakes in applying economic thinking. Specifically, people may fail to include all relevant benefits and costs, or they may measure costs and benefits incorrectly. Some benefits may be overlooked because they are difficult to measure, such as the scenic value of a working fishing port, provision of fresh, locally caught seafood to local communities, or protection of an endangered species. Some costs may be overlooked because they are hard to see. This is the case when there is no explicit monetary payment made, as occurs when a boat owner buys diesel or a fisheries manager hires a consultant. The cost associated with using resources you own, such as your own time or capital, can be hard to see. As mentioned before, asking what would otherwise have been the case can help you avoid this pitfall. You need also to be on the lookout for sunk costs, as they should not be considered. Sunk costs are costs that will be incurred regardless of the choice you make, such as the cost of vessel insurance when deciding whether to stay at sea for an extra day or not. Anyone who has ever eaten too much at an all-you-can-eat restaurant or kept throwing good money after bad into a failing investment will appreciate the problem of sunk costs. Many economic decisions are made at the margin. That is, they involve changing the existing level of some activity by a small or marginal amount. Shall I spend an extra day at sea this trip, or go home early? Shall I have a second beer with my friends instead of only one? Shall I continue to work another season, or retire now? Applying economic thinking to such questions requires measuring costs and benefits as marginal values. Consider the following scenario. Suppose you own a small fishing fleet comprising 4 vessels, which you have to allocate across 2 fishing grounds, deep and shallow. The grounds differ in terms of productivity, as shown below. Note that average catch per vessel in deep is constant regardless of the number of vessels fishing the ground, while the shallow area shows a crowding effect, with average catch per vessel declining as more vessels fish the area. For simplicity, let's assume that the cost of fishing each ground is the same, so that maximising your catch is the same as maximising your profit. Suppose also that you currently have 2 vessels fishing each ground, giving total catch of 440 kilos, 200 coming from deep and 240 kilos from shallow. At this effort allocation, the average productivity of a vessel in shallow, 120 kilos, is larger than the average productivity of a vessel in deep, only 100 kilos. Does this mean that you could do better by shifting a vessel from the deep to the shallow ground? But moving the vessel from deep to shallow has decreased total catch, even though average productivity in the shallow area was higher. To understand why, we need to think in terms of the marginal benefits and costs of reallocating the vessels. Marginal benefit is the increase in total benefit that results from carrying out one additional unit of an activity. Marginal cost, on the other hand, is the increase in total cost that results from carrying out one additional unit of an activity. Here we have added 2 columns to the table showing the marginal effects of adding more vessels to each of the grounds. For example, When we increase the number of vessels in the shallow ground from 1 to 2, total catch in that ground increases from 130 to 240 kilos, an increase of 110 kilos. This is the marginal benefit of the second vessel. Adding a third vessel increases total catch from 240 to 330 kilos, a marginal increase of only 90 kilos. So let's ask the question again. Starting with 2 boats in each area, should we move a vessel from the deep to the shallow area? With our marginal thinking hats on, the answer is only if the marginal benefit of doing so exceeds the marginal cost. In the case of your fishing fleet, the marginal benefit of the third vessel allocated to the shallow is 90 kilos, and the marginal cost of removing one vessel from the deep is 100 kilos. Clearly, reallocating effort in this way is not desirable, as it reduces total catch by 10 kilos. The clear message is that when considering decisions that reallocate scarce resources from one valuable use to another, think at the margin. The following takes the sort of economic thinking we have just applied in a stylized textbook example to a concrete, empirically based real-world example. Allocation of catch between different user groups is a common management issue. In the case shown, the question is whether the current allocation between commercial and recreational fishers, shown by the vertical line and measuring commercial catch from right to left and recreational catch from left to right, is the best possible one in terms of the value of the total allowable catch. Given the empirical estimates shown in the graph, the marginal value to recreational fishers is substantially higher than for commercial fishers, suggesting that the value of the fishery could be increased by transferring rights from commercial to recreational fishers. The question remains, of course, how much catch should be transferred. The authors were able to estimate the marginal value of catch to the recreational sector only for the current allocation, but show that the answer lies in the shape of the recreational marginal value curve. Depending on this shape, it could be optimal to reallocate anything from a small amount to the entire catch to this group. Clearly, more information about how rapidly the marginal value of catch declines as total recreational catch increases is needed in this case. Our purpose here, though, is not to debate the empirical evidence, but to show marginal economic thinking in action in informing a policy choice. We turn now to profit. Understanding profit is central to determining the behaviour of firms. Profit acts as a magnet in attracting resources to activities where they are most valued and away from activities in decline. However, the economist's notion of profit and its interpretation is different to the way we talk about profit in everyday life. When we think of profit, we usually have the accounting measure of profit in mind. That is, the difference between total revenue and explicit costs. But it is economic profit that is important for making economic decisions. Economic profit is equal to total revenue less all economic or opportunity costs, explicit and implicit. Clearly, economic profit can never be larger than accounting profit and will be equal to it only when there are no implicit costs. Here's a simple example. Joe is self-employed. He earns $5,000 revenue each month and incurs explicit costs of $3,000 for fuel, crew, interest on a bank loan. Accounting profit is therefore $2,000 per month. But Joe's best alternative is to be earning $3,000 each month working in a fish processing plant. Joe is making an economic loss of $1,000 per month. How should we interpret this? Joe's revenue does not cover the opportunity cost of all resources used in his business. He could earn a higher return on his time if he worked in the processing plant. He should look to leave the fishery. Of course, Joe may value the fishing lifestyle. The relevant question then is it worth at least $1,000 a month to him? If his answer is yes, then being a fisherman is the best choice for Joe. What if Joe were instead earning a positive economic profit? In this case, the opportunity cost of resources used in Joe's business is less than the revenue. Given this includes implicit as well as explicit costs, Joe's choice is easy. He should stay put in the fishery. Finally, if Joe's revenue equals his economic costs, his economic profit is zero. By definition, he can do no better elsewhere, and again, he should continue in the fishery. Note that economic profit will also guide the behaviour of other producers in the economy. Seeing that positive or above normal returns are to be made in fishing, others will want to enter the fishery. How this will pan out for Joe depends on whether entry to the fishery is easy or not. If it is not, then Joe will be able to continue enjoying a higher return than he could elsewhere. If it is easy, as is assumed in a perfectly competitive market, Joe's economic profit will be short-lived. Our last task in this module is to explain the importance of markets in our economy and to ask why they are not up to the task of determining how we use some goods and services, fish in the water amongst them. Markets are economic institutions in which individuals, buyers and sellers of a particular good or service, interact, with both groups making choices to advance their own self-interest. Globally, societies rely heavily on markets to do the job of allocating society's scarce resources among competing uses. That is, to determine what goods and services get produced, how this occurs, and who gets to consume them. In some circumstances, and for many, many goods and services, markets do a pretty good job of allocating society's scarce resources. When conditions in markets are right, markets tend to work for what we call private goods, things like pizzas, petrols, holidays, fish on the dock, fishing gear and quota. Fish in the water are no different to these goods in that they are rivalrous in consumption. That is, one person's enjoyment of the benefits of a good or service reduces its ability for other people to enjoy it. Fish caught by one boat reduce the catch available for others. But fish in the water are different to these other things in a critical way. They are non-excludable. That is, preventing people from benefiting from a good if they have not paid a price for it is difficult and costly, though not impossible. It is difficult to prevent fishers from catching fish when and where they please. Goods that are rivalrous but non-excludable are called common pool resources. Other examples include groundwater, air and forests. Defining and protecting private property rights in common pool resources is problematic, and without such property rights, markets cannot play the role described above. Common pool resources are prone to overuse, and collectively we need to find other ways of regulating their use. We will return to look briefly at how this might be done in Module 3.